Have you ever received a phone call that made your stomach drop and the floor fall out from underneath you? You know the exact kind of moment. The phone vibrates against the kitchen counter. You answer without thinking, and suddenly, devastating news completely shatters your reality. The voice on the other end of the line delivers words that leave you completely breathless, gasping for air in a room that suddenly feels entirely devoid of oxygen. You are left staring blankly at the wall, wondering how you are supposed to take even one more step. The world around you continues to spin. Cars drive by outside the window. The refrigerator hums. The clock ticks on the wall, but your personal universe has just ground to a violent, agonizing halt. Maybe you are standing in that exact place right now. Perhaps you are sitting in a sterile, fluorescent-lit doctor's office, staring at a medical chart that feels like a death sentence. Maybe you are staring at a packed suitcase in the hallway of a broken home, or looking at a bank statement with numbers that spell out utter ruin. We all face moments that break our hearts. Moments when the fragile illusions of our control are violently stripped away. But have you ever wondered what Jesus did the exact moment he received the most devastating news of his earthly life? In the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 14, we are given a breathtaking window into the profound humanity of Christ. The news arrives not by a phone call, but by the dust-covered, tear-stained followers of John the Baptist. Imagine the heavy, suffocating silence that falls over the room as they break the news to Jesus. John, his cousin, his faithful forerunner, the wild prophet who baptized him in the muddy, rushing waters of the Jordan River, has been brutally and senselessly executed by King Herod. Beheaded at a drunken banquet to satisfy a petty grudge. Think of the white-hot grief that must have seized Jesus' chest. The suffocating weight of human mourning. Scripture tells us exactly what Jesus did in response to this shattering news. He didn't offer a quick, hollow platitude. He didn't immediately stand up to preach a sermon. He withdrew. He stepped into a small, wooden fishing boat, hearing the gentle lapping of the water against the hull, and he sailed away to a desolate place by himself. He sought the quiet, isolated refuge of his Father's presence to process his breaking heart. But the storm of human need did not stop for his grief. By the time his boat scraped against the rocky shore across the lake, a massive crowd of thousands had already run on foot along the dirt paths to meet him. You might expect Jesus to turn them away. You might expect him to throw up his hands and say, "Not today. I am mourning. I have nothing left to give." But instead, when he stepped out of the boat and saw the vast sea of desperate faces, the lame leaning heavily on wooden crutches, the blind reaching out timidly into the darkness, the exhausted mothers holding feverish infants, he was moved with profound, gut-wrenching compassion. Even in the epicenter of his own heartbreak, Jesus stood as a firm foundation for the brokenhearted. He healed their sick, touching their leprosy-scarred skin and opening their blind eyes. And as the sun began to dip below the horizon, painting the Galilean sky in hues of fiery orange and deep, bruised violet, he took 5 small loaves of tough barley bread and 2 dried fish. He broke them with his own calloused hands, looked up to heaven, and miraculously fed over 5,000 people. He faced the storm of devastating news by anchoring himself to the Father. And in doing so, he became the unbreakable anchor for everyone around him. This is exactly why Jesus' teachings on storms carry such profound, undeniable weight. He didn't just preach a theoretical message about surviving tragedy, he lived through it. Imagine him standing on a grassy hillside, the salty sea breeze carrying his voice to the multitudes as he paints a vivid, terrifying picture. He asks them to imagine the sky turning a bruised, violent purple. The wind doesn't just blow. It howls, tearing fiercely at the silver-green leaves of the olive trees and kicking up blinding, choking clouds of dust that sting the eyes. In the distance, a torrential wall of dark water is rushing down the dry, limestone hills, transforming parched ravines into deadly, roaring rivers. Jesus paints this picture vividly. Two men are desperately watching the sky. One man is standing inside a beautiful, elaborate house built right on the soft, sandy valley floor. It was easy to build. Fast. The weather had been beautiful during construction, the warm sun beating on his back as he quickly stacked his walls without a second thought. But now, as the floodwaters slam violently against the walls, the mud bricks begin to dissolve. The foundation shifts, sinking sickeningly into the liquefied earth beneath it. You can almost hear the terrifying, splintering crack of the timber as the roof caves in. You can picture the sheer, adrenaline-fueled panic as the walls buckle, sweeping everything away in a violent, unstoppable rush of mud, rocks, and debris. The ruin of that house is absolute. But up on the high, jagged cliff, another man watches the exact same storm. He spent months chipping away at solid rock, his hands blistered and bleeding, his muscles burning from the grueling labor of digging deep into the earth. He didn't take the easy way out. Now, the rain batters his windows with the concussive force of thrown gravel. The wind screams against his heavy wooden door, and the floodwaters rage around the base of the cliff, clawing desperately at the stone. But the house does not move. It does not even shudder. It stands completely still in the chaos. When Jesus told this story of the two builders, he was speaking directly to a massive crowd of everyday people, alongside the Pharisees who had gathered to judge him. Look closely at that crowd in your mind's eye. These were not people who had their lives perfectly put together. They were oppressed heavily by the iron fist of the Roman Empire, taxed into grinding, daily poverty, and burdened by the rigid, impossible religious laws placed on their weary shoulders by the Pharisees. The Pharisees stood there on the edges of the crowd with their fine, flowing robes and enlarged phylacteries, looking down their noses, trusting completely in the sandy foundation of their own self-righteousness. They genuinely believed their strict rule-keeping would save them from the storms of life. But the everyday people? The fishermen smelling of the sea, the tax collectors with heavy consciences, the women who wept openly at Jesus' feet? They knew their own fragility. They knew they needed something stronger than rules. Jesus looked into their weary, weather-beaten eyes and offered them the ultimate truth. The storm is coming for absolutely everyone. The rain falls on the just and the unjust alike. The question is not if the storm will hit your life. The question is, asterisk, what are you standing on when the floodwaters inevitably rise? To build on the rock, Jesus said, is to hear his words and put them into practice. It is to root your identity, your hope, and your salvation entirely in him, rather than in your own fleeting circumstances. Perhaps you are listening to this and thinking, it is easy to talk about building on the rock when the sun is shining. But what happens when the floor has already fallen out? What happens when I am already drowning? Turn your attention to another real moment in Scripture, found in the Gospel of Mark. It is nighttime on the Sea of Galilee. Jesus and his disciples are in a small fishing boat, navigating the inky black water. Suddenly, a furious squall comes up. This is not a gentle, passing rain. It is a violent, churning tempest. The waves are so massive, they are breaking right over the sides of the boat. The disciples are ankle-deep, then knee-deep in freezing, terrifying water. You can smell the sharp, metallic tang of the brine and hear the frantic, terrified shouts of seasoned fishermen who know that they are seconds away from sinking into a watery grave. The thick ropes are snapping. The sail is tearing in the gale, and the panic is absolute. And where is Jesus? He is in the stern of the boat, sound asleep on a cushion. The disciples shake him awake, screaming over the deafening roar of the wind, "Teacher, don't you care if we drown?" Have you ever screamed that exact prayer into the darkness of your bedroom? God, don't you care? Don't you see this medical report? Don't you see my broken marriage? Are you asleep while my entire life is falling apart? Jesus stands up in the violently rocking boat. He does not panic. He does not grab a bucket to start frantically bailing water. He simply looks at the raging sea, at the towering waves and the howling wind, and he speaks 3 words into the chaos. Peace, be still. Instantly, the wind dies down. The massive, churning waves collapse into smooth glass. The deafening, terrifying roar is immediately replaced by a stunning, breathless silence. The disciples are left standing in a puddle, dripping wet, staring in absolute awe at a man who commands the very elements of the earth. When the phone call comes, when the floor falls out from underneath you, you do not have to rely on your own fragile strength to hold your life together. If you have built your house on the sand of your own abilities, your own wealth, or your own carefully laid plans, the devastation of this world will eventually sweep you away. But if you have built your life on the solid rock of Jesus Christ, you have a foundation that cannot be shaken by any diagnosis, any financial loss, or any earthly tragedy. Building on the rock does not mean the storm will bypass your house. The winds will still scream against your door. The rain will still batter your windows. You will still feel the profound, agonizing grief of living in a broken world, just as Jesus wept over the brutal death of John the Baptist. But you will not be destroyed. You will not collapse into the floodwaters. Maybe today, you are standing in the wreckage of a house built on sand, looking tearfully at the debris of your broken plans. It is not too late to start rebuilding your life on the rock. Or perhaps you are huddled in the dark right now, listening to the wind howl, terrified that your foundation is going to crack. Let the words of Christ echo through the center of your storm. Peace, be still. He is in the boat with you. He is the solid rock beneath your feet. When the devastating news comes, you can breathe. You can take the next step. Because when absolutely everything else falls apart, the rock remains.